Welcome back, everybody, to day 4 of EA Global Summit, virtual conference connecting global EA practitioners. This is Juhi again from Summit team. Thanks all for showing fabulous participation in this conference. We are still having exciting and informative sessions coming up in the last day tomorrow. For this session, we have Doug, founder and CTO of Parallel Agile, presenting here today CodeBot UX Generate code from EA wireframes. Just to bring your attention once again, we also have the Teams channel ready and set up for you to connect and interact with Doug and other practitioners after the session and throughout this summit. Please refer to the chat window to find the link. If you have any difficulties in connecting to Teams channel, please feel free to reach us. Now over to you, Doug. You can now present your session. And thanks, Doug. Thanks for the wonderful session once again.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks a lot for hosting this. Good morning. Well, for me, good morning. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. I want to talk today about some work that I'm really excited about. Are you hearing me okay, Julie?
Yeah, we can hear you. We just lost for a last few seconds. It is fine now.
Okay. So let me jump in here. So in the immortal words of Austin Powers, allow myself to introduce myself, but it's not really just me doing this. And I want to introduce not only myself, which is a repeat of yesterday, but I want to introduce you to Matt Stevens, who has been my partner in crime for many years now, for about 18 years, I believe. Matt and I go back to our first book, The Case Against Extreme Programming, or Extreme Programming Refactored, where we kind of pointed out some flaws in skipping analysis and design in the Agile community when it first started. And then we've done a number of books together, including use case-driven object modeling. We developed the design-driven testing add-in. And about 2 years ago, I roped him into collaborating on Parallel Agile. And he took over the creation or the CodeBot work that we had started, and he's really turned it into an industrial strength platform. So Matt, I think you're out there. Thank you for all your work on this. And I'm gonna later just mention someone who's working with us, a really great young man named Ritesh, who is responsible for a video you're gonna see at the end of this presentation. Bottom line is, we've been working on modeling and Sparks related things for a very long time now. And so we've been researching Parallel Agile since 2014. The book is available on Amazon. And I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of CodeBot. So this started in about 2014 and 2015, where we were building a project. It's really a geofenced coupon delivery project that we started. And we found a really useful design pattern, which is we were just back then learning about NoSQL databases and REST APIs, or at least I was learning about them. And we kind of figured out that we could take a domain class from a class diagram, and it was very useful if we created what they call the CRUD functions: create, read, update, delete, and then wrap all of that in a Node.js API. And we came upon this because we were building a mobile app and a web app, and the mobile app had to run on both Android and iPhone. And we needed a cloud-hosted database that could glue this stuff together. And so the first one we did, when we did it by hand, was done with Cassandra. And then I started mentoring. There was a student in that class who decided he wanted to go get his PhD, and I wound up mentoring him on code generation. His name was Bo Wong, very bright young man, one of the co-authors on the Parallel Agile book. And so Bo built the first incarnation of a code generator that took an EA class diagram and generated a database using MongoDB and an API using Node.js. And about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, Matt Stevens came in and took this over and turned this into a much more industrial strength CodeBot that was retargetable, meaning fully template driven. So we started getting into CodeBot retargeting towards the end of last year, and we had a lot of success opening it up to different databases, including some SQL databases. So MySQL, SQL Server, things like that. Postgres, you'll see a Postgres demo in about 45 minutes. And me being sort of a greedy guy in terms of new capabilities and new features, I sort of pushed Matt and his team to develop UI code generation because I thought UI code generation would be interesting to a lot of people. So that's where we are, and we're going to show you some stuff that's not quite released yet, but getting ready to release and getting closer every day. So first thing that you should know is that you access the CodeBot through an add-in that we built for EA called the Parallel Agile add-in. And the URL for this is simply parallelagile.net/EA. And the add-in is free. And it's free to try the CodeBot. You get all the features of it, but what you don't get is the server-side code that implements the database and the API on the server with the free license. If you actually want to use the database, we ask you to buy a license for what we think is a pretty modest price. And we've set it up so that we have early adopter licenses available so that we can go in to the back end and mark your license as an early adopter license and open up some of the new features that we're developing if you'd like to do that. So having said that, let's start with what the existing production shipping CodeBot does. And that is to generate MongoDB and Node.js from a UML domain model. And so you basically draw your class diagram in EA and you right click on it, say specialized parallel agile, and the code generator goes to work and it creates a Mongo collection for each class on your domain model. And in that Mongo collection, there are methods for create, read, update, delete, read many, and the API is automatically hosted for testing. And so there's actually a lot of interesting work going on in the automatic web hosting. If you're into DevOps, you'll kind of like what Matt's been doing here. But the code generator produces server-side code, client-side code, API documentation. And it's a fully template-driven code generator that's built in Scala. To kind of summarize this, you basically start with an EA domain model, just a class diagram, and that domain model basically creates all the stuff on the right side of this picture. So every class gets a Mongo collection, and we get an API to access that Mongo collection. We get client-side code in Java and JavaScript. We get API documentation in Swagger, which is also called OpenAPI. And you get all of this web hosted, so you can just immediately run the code generator and start doing POSTMAN testing. So I'm going to take you real quickly through all this, and we're going to get to the UI code generation. I know if you tuned in to see the UI stuff, it's coming in about 5 minutes. So the thing about the way we do the UI code generation is it's not just UI code that's not connected to anything. It's UI code that's connected to a database. So one of the things we're looking for early adopters for is that we're rolling out a number of additional database targets besides Mongo. These are basically all working, but haven't gone through yet the level of testing that we want before we publish them as released software. And we really want to get a bunch of partners that are trying to build a real system. Let's say we're building something with SQL Server, and they want to really use this thing in anger and let us make very, very sure that everything is working at industrial strength levels before we publish. So the example I'm going to take you through is an current project that we're working as we're writing the Parallel Agile book, which took pretty close to 3 years, I would say, to get this book done. We decided that we really needed to build some example projects to test everything we were doing and take them all the way through to production and shipping systems. And I decided that since we had to develop some real life software systems, there's no reason that we shouldn't have some fun doing it. And so myself being a Hawaii freak, I decided to learn a little bit about game development and develop a Hawaiian themed VR AR game. It's built in Unity 3D. We got the first version of it published in January. The whole game was designed in Enterprise Architect, so we went through and did a lot of use cases and model view controller analysis and a domain model, and we generated our database in the API from the EA domain model. So it's up in the App Store for a whopping 99 cents. You can download a copy. And we're continuing ongoing development on this. So we decided to publish the first version of the game with VR only and without a feature called achievements, which is something that is pretty popular with gamers. So we had to make a couple changes to this, and these changes are actually ongoing like right now as we speak. We are upgrading the database schema to handle achievements. So we already have the new schema design. We've already regenerated the database in the API, and we are right in the middle of integrating this with all the UI screens to handle achievements. And all this has been done with no manual database programming at all. So this is the actual domain model. This is from about, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and it evolved slightly since then. We went through 2 or 3 iterations at the EA class diagram level. And this is how, if you ask me, this is how iterative development should work, is that you modify your class diagram, regenerate the database in the API, and start using it, and then you have this class diagram as your reference model, and you can extend this a lot easier than going in and doing all your database code manually. So we've just regenerated the achievements, and then to regenerate the API, you basically go into EA, you install our add-in, and once you install our add-in, then when you right-click on the package and say specialize, you get a menu option for Parallel Agile, and it says generate my project. And the CodeBot goes to work and builds your database, your API, and your API documentation. And it takes, and it auto-hosts it. So it takes, I don't know, 30 or 40 seconds to regenerate your database and API and spin up a AWS Lambda instance and auto-host it. But you don't have to use our auto-hosting if you don't want it. You may have a secure system and you want to keep everything private. We're doing some stuff on the hosting end to address secure hosting, but you can get your zip file downloaded. It kind of downloads automatically. And in the zip file you get server-side code, client-side code, API documentation, and a set of Pojo Java domain classes. With the free license, your server folder is empty, okay? With the paid license, you actually get all the Mongo and Node code in here. So here's the JavaScript client-side code that got generated for TikiMan. And what you can see is that the create, oops, sorry, can't click there. Create, read, update, and delete code are done on both the client and the server. And so you have essentially an API for database access that's generated with a server-side component. That's the Node.js API that lets you access the database, and a client-side, maybe switching client and server in my early morning confusion here. But at any rate, you get the server-side code here and the client-side code here. And the architecture for this is you have essentially an invariant API that doesn't matter which database you're using on the back end. So if it's Mongo or if it's MySQL, you get the same API in Node.js. And so your back-end databases are interchangeable. And that's not as easy as it sounds when you get into things like cascading deletes. They're handled differently in a NoSQL database. They have nested JSON, and there's different code on the SQL clients. You also get API documentation that's generated automatically, so no one has to sit there and write API docs. And so here is the TikiMan Go API, and since it's auto-hosted, you can actually use this try it out button immediately and start posting data into your database just to make sure everything is up and running and working before you start modifying your code to use the new API. So in those API docs, if I open up achievements, you can see I've got get, post, patch, delete. I got find by ID. I've got, read many. I got modify. So it's essentially an API for everything on your domain model, and you have the ability to access it in the database. It's hosted securely, so you can't do any of this without an access token. So you are protected from other people trying to hack into your database. And all of this hosting is really within a few seconds of modifying your domain model. You are able to access it with tools like POSTMAN and start testing that your API is working. So here we've done a post, and here we've done a get, and you can see that what we posted got added to the database. So this tells us that basically the server-side code works, the client-side code, API documentation, API's hosted, it's testable, everything's up and running. And at this point, you can start modifying your application code to make use of the new API. Someone in yesterday's presentation asked about caching. And as a result, I added this slide that I wasn't going to talk about today, but we are actually working on Redis caching. So if you're generating a production database, there are likely to be some elements in your, some entities in your domain model that get accessed really frequently and will be a performance bottleneck if they're not cached. So we have been working on sort of transparent caching using Redis. And this is one of the early adopter features that we would like to have some people using in anger before we publish it. So now we get to the basic topic of the presentation as advertised, which is really not just user interface code generation, but what I call full model view controller code generation. And let me explain what I mean by this. you can think of software systems in lots of ways, but I think of software systems as collections of use cases. Okay, so collections of scenarios. I can take pretty much any software system that I've ever met, and I can identify a set of scenarios, and I can model those as use cases, and I can decompose those use cases, each use case, into a model view controller type paradigm. If you've read any of my books on use case driven development, you'll know that we sometimes call this diagram a robustness diagram, where the entity objects are the model, the boundary objects are the view, and the control objects are the controllers. And so essentially you have screens, those are the views, and database access, that's the model, and logic to glue all that together. So that's a very simple explanation of model view controller inside a use case. And so what I've showed you up to now, the original CodeBot, is generating the model code. But as I said, I'm greedy, and I'd really like to be able to generate not just the database access, but I'd like to generate the screens. And what makes sense to me is to generate the screens from the wireframes. So EA has a nice wireframing tool built into it. Why don't we try generating screens from those wireframes? And then while we're doing that, if we want to thread a bunch of screens together, maybe we can use a state machine to link a bunch of screens together into essentially a fully functional application. So, my argument in going back and forth with Matt on what should we do next is that we basically, if you think in rough terms here, that a third of your effort of building a use case is on the model, a third of it is on the view, and a third of it is on the controller. Well, with the CodeBot database API, we kind of almost zero out this model part of this. And so what's left is the view and the controller. But if we could generate the view, the screens, as well as the database, we're kind of doubling the usefulness, the effectiveness of the CodeBot. And just as we're generating different databases now, Oracle and MySQL and Firebase and Redis, on the model side, we can also generate different view targets. So we can generate React and Angular and Vue and native Android and native iPhone. And the key to all this is that we're not just generating empty prototype screen code, but we're actually generating screens that are linked to real live databases. So that there's some precedent in the industry for generating UI code from wireframes, and one of them is called Adobe XD. And Adobe XD lets you draw up a wireframe, and it generates a web page with HTML and style sheets that lets you look at that. But it's not really much more than here's the page you can look at, and then you have to customize it to hook it up to databases. We're trying to do a more thorough job than that with code generation. That's why I had to go through and show you the whole database access API first. So without further ado, let's get to the wireframe code generation. So the first one that we did, and I really have to acknowledge a young man named Ritesh, who has been driving a lot of this work. He's really just jumped into this work sort of like a duck in water. He seems to turn out more work in a week than I think is possible for him to do in a couple months. So I get to sit up here and take credit for a lot of hard work that's being done by people named Matt and Ritesh on this. So Matt and Ritesh, thank you. Anyway, our first instance of this was we took a wireframe and Ritesh code generated it in Flutter. And his argument for doing Flutter first was that Flutter lets you build both mobile, Android and iPhone, and also web application. So here's a really simple login page as an EA wireframe. Here's a little snip of the code generation, and on the right you see some working Flutter code. Here's another one for registration. So now we can take a wireframe and generate a working wireframe screen, or a working registration page, rather, as a web app. And so this is starting to get pretty cool, and it's even more cool when you add it on top of the existing CodeBot functionality. Matt likes to do everything industrial strength, and he's saying, yeah, we really need to be able to take things like your identity class, which is a user, and make sure that no one can access somebody else's user data. So he's making sure that this is all done with JSON Web Tokens, and we can control access to who gets to see what in our generated application. So we're working towards full model view controller code generation. And so I should point out here, so we're working on, as you've seen, the model code generation and the view code generation. I should point out that Enterprise Architect has built into it some really unique features for code generation. And that includes something called a business rule composer that I became aware of probably around 10 years ago when I was doing some ebooks with Sparks. If you'd like those ebooks, feel free to shoot me an email later and I can send them to you. I think they're available somewhere on the Sparks website as well. But Sparks has additional code generation that lets you essentially type in business rules as kind of non-code formulas and then generates all the business rule logic. And they also have some behavioral code generation from activity, state, and sequence diagrams. That's different from what we're doing, but I think it's all complementary to what we're doing with CodeBot. So, and this is the most recent work that's been going on, is we have a client who's been very interested in state machine code generation. And so we kind of turned the dial up on state machine code generation a little bit. And the basic idea here is that we'd like to be able to link a set of screens together using state machines. And if you can string together, half a dozen screens, and those screens all hook to the database, you can pretty much generate complete working applications with little or no coding required. So I'm actually not going to play this demo that's up on YouTube. These slides are up on the Teams channel. You can grab them and grab this link, or you can go to YouTube and Google CodeBot UX Sneak Peek, and you can find that. We're moving pretty fast right now, so that video is about 2 weeks old, and it's already obsolete because my friend Ritesh sent me a video last night that I had to go edit and turn into what I'm going to show you now. And so this is going to run about 5 minutes. I think we're still okay on time. You probably can't hear the sound on this video, but that's okay. I'm just going to talk over it. So this is the latest as of midnight last night. We're going to turn some wireframes into React and Postgres and link them together with a state machine. So here is a state machine where I can register users, log in users, add videos, and play videos. Okay, and this is all built with zero code required. So here's our registration page wireframe. And this is pretty similar to what I showed you in the PowerPoint. We've been able to do this for a couple of weeks now. And so We'll just walk you through the wireframes quickly. There's register, there's login, and we're not showing you all the magic of how we're linking these to the back end yet. But here's a page to add videos. And I will say I asked Ritesh to make this screen a few days ago, and he's already got it working, as you'll see in a minute. So here we're going to play some videos. So there's a video player widget that the EA wireframer has in it, and he's able to translate that into a React video player widget. We have a very simple domain model, and it's basically users and videos. So we're going to have a user table and a video table, and those user attributes match the fields on the wireframe. And now we're going to generate a Postgres database and a Node API. And so this is all going on in the back end. You won't see that. Here's a really quick query that he did to verify in Postgres that our database is active. It's empty, so the users table has been created. Now he's going to create, he's already created the videos table. He's now going to verify that the video table is created. And then he's going to generate the React screens. And so now we've got a live React screen. This is all built with no manual coding. And he's going to enter Groucho Marx in the database. And as you'll see in a minute, Groucho has a pet duck, and he likes to dance, which is all true for Groucho. So we've now added Groucho to the database, and we're going to log him in using the login screen. And it was our state machine that threaded us from registration to login. Okay. And the state machine again threaded us over to the video posting page. So we're now checking to make sure that Groucho, yeah, he's in the database. So we know registration is working. We kind of knew that already because we were able to log in. But now we're going to add some videos. And at my request, Ritesh went through and found a couple of Marx Brothers videos on YouTube, because if we were going to use a Marx Brothers example, then we certainly needed to have Marx Brothers videos in the database. Somewhere around 10 o'clock last night, Ritesh was out finding Marx Brothers videos for us on YouTube. And so he's added one video, and now he's going to check to make sure that that video got in there. And he's going to add a second video because he had to go test our read many functionality out of the database. And so if you say the secret word, you win $100, and Groucho's duck comes down and gives you the $100 bill. And so it's now adding the secret word. And so, you know, the point of this demo, there's the duck. The point of this demo is that you can actually build like really useful applications with this without writing any code, where EA becomes pretty much your whole development tool, EA and CodeBot. So now there it is in the database, and the URLs are in there. And now that we know that that worked, he's going to say, I'm done. Our state machine threads us over to the video player. And now Ritesh is able to toggle back and forth between these videos and play them. And so I don't know about all of you, but I'm pretty much blown away by how much we've been able to do and how quickly we've been able to do it. So that's what we're working on. And essentially, we can, you know, we built this website, this web application, where we can register, log in, and play videos without writing any code. So I'm pretty excited to be able to sit here and show you all of that. With that, we are looking for early adopters that want to jump in and help us test all of this new functionality. We're basically able to develop new features so quickly. We're actually using Parallel Agile to develop CodeBot right now, which is one of the reasons that we're getting so much functionality so quickly. And the other reason is I'm working with some really, really smart people. If you'd like to help us with early release testing, please contact me. If you purchase a CodeBot license and you contact us and say, I want to be an early adopter, we can go in on the back end and enable early access to new features. So we're planning to roll these new databases and UI frameworks out one at a time over, I'd say, the next 6 to 8 months. We're going to be rolling these things out pretty much continuously. And we really just need to make sure we have real users building real projects with them before we're comfortable rolling them out, because you just hit a different set of issues doing something for real. We've got our own test projects, but that's not enough. So with that, I think I'm gonna, what happened yesterday was we had about 20 minutes for questions, and I basically put the Teams window on the screen here and started addressing questions. So I'm going to do that now. And let me just drag Teams over here. So this is the Parallel Agile channel on Teams. And I posted both a link to our main CodeBot page and to our EA add-in page here. Judy, do we have any questions?
As of now, no, Doug, we haven't received any questions. People, please feel free to drop in any questions if you have any anything to be clarified by Doug. As of now, no.
Everyone's in shock, maybe. Did I post a link to that video I just showed? No, I haven't yet, because we may want to make it a little more production worthy. It's on my Google Drive right now. I literally was up until midnight last night editing that video. I don't know if that's the music we want or anything else, but feel free to email me. As of yesterday, a lot of people were connecting to me on LinkedIn, so you're welcome to do that. So I'll share it privately, but we don't have it up on our YouTube channel yet, just because it's too new. How do we link the wireframe and the domain model? Bill, you're going to connect on LinkedIn. That's cool. How do we link the wireframe and the domain model? We are using some fields in EA, like alias fields and tag values. And at the moment, a lot of this is experimental, and I'm not sure that the way we're doing it now is going to be the final way that we're doing it. So I edited a lot of that out of the video that was sent to me last night, because we want to make sure we've got all of it nailed down in a final form before we release it. But for example, one of the things that we have done is in the wireframe, and let me see if I can put the video back here. Whoops, sorry, that's not the video. That's the video. If I go back to one of these wireframes, in the properties field of the EA wireframe element and of each field on the screen, we can use things like possibly an alias field to link to a field in the database. So we're reserving the right to fool about with that a little bit and make sure that we have it working in a way that we're happy with before we release it. But we're basically using other properties in EA to do that linking. How do we deal with more complicated situations like many-to-many relationships? There is an article on the CodeBot website. Let's see if I go to CodeBot here. We have a bunch of tutorials here that are on the CodeBot page. This is just, by the way, parallelagile.net. But this particular post goes through and it has a table of how we're handling aggregation, composition, multiplicity. I think this gets to your question of how we're code generating all of these things. So I would refer you to, there's a whole bunch of stuff in our Parallel Agile blog, which you can get off the parallelagile.com website. But we put a lot of the tutorials right on the CodeBot page as well. I saw another question about, do we have a sample model that you can run the CodeBot with? Yeah, we do. We wrote a book, Matt and I wrote a book called Design-Driven Testing a few years ago that has a hotel mapping website in it. And you can use that example. We have it exported into XMI. And so you can just run this and see what gets generated from it. You can also use any EA model that you have and use the CodeBot and try it out for free. Yeah, I'm going to not get into things like heap translations and stuff like that in this kind of presentation, but I'll be happy to introduce you to Matt, and you can bat these ideas off of Matt because he's really the guy who's driving all that. Can we post the example EAT file to Teams? Yes, we can do that. Matt, if you're out there, if you can email me, or if I'm not sure if they gave you posting privileges for Parallel Agile channel, but if you have that handy, you're welcome to post it. Matt was having trouble accessing Teams yesterday, so I'm not sure if he's on the Teams. Is the functionality constrained to generated code, or can you add custom code to it as well? If so, can you reverse engineer it? Yeah, we're trying right now to get a lot of stuff working and published. Reverse engineering in at least the near future is probably going to be limited to if you have a database and you want to use EA's built-in reverse engineering tools, and EA does really well at reverse engineering code. But you can do that, take that class diagram, and then run that through CodeBot. But the basic, when you get into reverse engineering and round trip stuff, you run into a whole lot of complexity. And so what we're trying to do is make our generated code basically immutable so that you don't modify the generated code, and then you have other logic that you can build into your applications that you can access the database with. But certainly round tripping is interesting functionality. We're going to be looking at all that stuff, but we have about 15 things that we're trying to get released for forward engineering first. And really what we're focusing on, I think the big win in terms of being able to sort of stand up an application with little or no programming required is, I want to go back to the video here and take us right back to the very first step of this, which is to be able to wireframe a bunch of screens, string them together with a state machine, and generate essentially a user interface path through a sequence of screens without writing any manually written code. So everything that you saw in this demo, all of this, registering users, adding videos, playing videos, this is all done with no manually written code at all, 0 lines of manually written code. Thanks for purchasing TikiMan Game. I'm not sure if we want to share our design models with our users, but if you can give me a good reason why you need to see them, I might be able to arrange a private walkthrough. We're not. We're trying to walk a fine line between making lots of functionality available for free for testing and not completely giving away the store in terms of intellectual property. So I appreciate that you're interested in seeing those models. Feel free to email me offline and tell me what you'd like to do with them. We will consider that. Thank you for the nice comments. I'm pretty happy on. Oh, I see Matt has made it on to Teams and is replying here. So extension points, so you can define your own Express.js middleware functions from a different folder, so they're not overwritten by subsequent code generations. Yeah, Matt, that's an interesting answer, and it actually gets back to if you go into some of Ivar Jakobsen's original work on use cases and how they were implemented in the UML standard, you have includes and extends, and so we may get into actually reading use case diagrams and looking at use case extension points. One of the things about the way Matt has implemented CodeBot is that he's got a UML parser that parses whatever he tells it to parse. So a month ago, he wasn't parsing state machines, but now he is. And so if he could parse state machines, he could parse use case diagrams that use includes and extends to do some of that as well. The learning exercise to see how email models are used to map to mobile applications. Understand. If you have companies that are interested and have questions, please do contact on LinkedIn and email. We think a lot of companies are going to be interested in this. In particular, what we're looking for right now is probably I would say 1 to 2 dozen companies that want to really do deep dives into what we're doing and help us test it out, in an industrial strength setting. Real projects, real use cases, real systems. We're happy to sign NDAs and help with all this. But we're pretty fussy about when we release this stuff. Do we plan to generate code from robustness diagrams? We've certainly thought about that, Opor. We don't have it sort of in development right now because we decided to do the state machine code gen first to really use the state machine as a thread through a set of screens. I will refer you, Opor, to the built-in EA behavioral code generation that's actually been in EA for at least 10 years, because the ebooks that I was writing about behavioral code generation were done, I think, in 2010. And I can send you those ebooks if you contact me offline. But Sparks already can generate code from activity diagrams and state machines and sequence diagrams. So generating from a sequence diagram is it's a lot like generating from the robustness diagram, only there's a little more detail in the sequence diagram. So the specific use that we're exploring so far is state machines to thread screens together, because I thought that was an exceptionally useful one. But as I said, Matt's built a general UML parser, and he can enable UML parsing for any diagram type that you can think of. And so that means we can do, any kind of custom diagram. Feel free to contact us offline about that. Training model, in person or remote? Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things on my to-do list is get the website updated, the Parallel Agile website, because it still talks about in-person training. Obviously, in-person training took a large hit as a business model about 4 months ago when coronavirus hit the planet. So yes, we're offering all of our training remote by Zoom right now. It can all be done that way. I'm still doing a lot of teaching at USC, and I'm teaching all of my classes by Zoom. Chuck Suschek, who we're working with, is doing a lot of Scrum training, and he's doing all his training by Zoom as well. So yeah, everything's on the table right now. I hope that the world returns to a point where on-site training is once again feasible, but in the interim, training by Zoom is certainly workable. It really isn't too bad, because with Zoom now, I can see everybody's face when they're talking and when I'm talking. So if someone is sitting there looking very, very hopelessly confused, I can see it, and I can also look at people's screens and they can show me what they're stuck on. So yeah, we can teach people how to drive EA, how to drive CodeBot, how to do all this stuff by Zoom now, and it's actually pretty effective. So other questions? We're still early for the 1 hour time limit on the webinar. I always like to finish early because I think it is better to leave people wanting a little bit more than it is to have everyone falling asleep because we took we took too much time and presented things in too much depth. Charles Hume, I see your comment. Yeah, it's not a simple problem. And when you're doing stuff like this, you have to be really careful about which cans of worms you choose to open up. One of our advisors in Parallel Agile is a pretty smart guy named Adam Frankel, who used to be VP marketing for Rational. And when we were first trying to figure out, how do we market this CodeBot thing, Adam and I had a pretty in-depth conversation where he said, yeah, we tried code generation marketing at Rational, and we just ran into a lot of problems with the round trip stuff. And he was one of the people that encouraged me to use essentially immutable code where the code that you generate really doesn't need a lot of modification, but yet you can link it in with other code that does need to be written by hand. And so, yeah, you have to be really careful about which battles you choose to fight and when you choose to fight them. I'm very lucky to be working with Matt because Matt has some decades of experience in doing this stuff as well. And, if you make a wrong decision from a product feature marketing standpoint, you can step into a pit of quicksand. So there's a lot of what seems to us to be low-hanging fruit where we can build really, really useful functionality that's generally useful to a wide range of people. And so that's why we started out with just, database access, CRUD functions, because everybody needs it. They all need it all the time. There's some stuff you need to do with it. It needs to be done securely. It needs to allow for caching. And so we're kind of trying to sneak up on these problems and do things in simple, generally useful, and yet industrial strength ways. Charles, addressing your latest comment. There's been a lot of attempts at code generation that have kind of washed up on the beach. Part of the reason that this thing happens is you look at targets of opportunity, your eyes get big and say, ooh, I can do a lot of really useful stuff if I go after this. And then you find out that there's some hidden pitfalls in here that make it a lot harder than it seems on the surface. So we're attacking a lot right now. The stuff we're attacking, we believe, is generally useful. I'm hoping there's some folks from Spark Systems attending here, and I would like you to think about this. What if we could do code generation in a way that's really genuinely useful to about a third of the Sparks client base, which I understand is approaching 1 million users right now. That's a pretty big opportunity target, and we're interested in partnering really closely with Sparks on this. And we think that the basic CodeBot database access API is very generally useful. We think code generation for wireframes is really, really generally useful. We think if you can do wireframes and thread the screens together with a state machine, that becomes hugely useful because now you can put simple applications together, with literally no coding, just EA becomes your whole development tool. We're all excited about that, and we're going to pick our targets carefully. We're going to sneak up on things slowly and try to make them industrial strength. I've got Matt saying, "Yeah, but wait, we need to do these other 5 things before we, before we can really claim that this is." Before we can really claim that this is, ready to roll, and we want to work with partners that are doing stuff for real. The key functionality for real code generation, and there's always some business rules. Yeah, I don't, that the business rule code generation stuff, I don't know if you've looked at it. I don't know your name, KHIATP18, but I don't know if you looked at the Sparks Business Rule Composer. Philip, have you looked at the Business Rule Composer? Because they've had this functionality that's built into EA for about 10 years. In my travels through the industry, I haven't run through a lot of people that are actually using it. But Philip, I wrote an ebook with Sparks. It's we call it the SOA ebook. It's a service-oriented architecture ebook, and there was a little chapter in this on the Business Rule Composer. I got really impressed by this functionality 10 years ago, but I haven't, in the clients that I personally work with, I haven't run into too many people that are actually making use of this functionality. But if you just go into the EA help files and search for Business Rule Composer, that's some pretty amazing functionality that they've built. And one of the things that's on my list is to start integrating what we're doing with CodeBot with that Business Rule Composer functionality. Because if you can do screens and if you can do databases, then a lot of what's left is business rules. And I already know Sparks has a great solution for that. Yeah, if you haven't looked at that yet, please do, because one of the interesting things about EA is that they've turned out so much functionality for Enterprise Architect that just making people aware of it, I think, has been a big challenge for Sparks. It's like, oh yeah, we actually built that 10 years ago, but you may not know about it yet, and so that's why way back in the early days of our partnership with Sparks, we started doing tutorials on CD-ROMs, and we did some ebooks, and we're happy to steer you towards built-in, some of the other stuff that's real interesting that I've seen a few clients that are using it is like the hardcore state machine animation. That's some pretty cool stuff that Sparks has built as well. So yeah, I think we're at 11:03, so I've used up my hour. I'll hang out on Teams for a while, and I'm guessing Matt will as well. I want to thank you all for your attention. I want to once again thank Judy and the Collaborate Spark Systems India team for putting this together. I think these kind of things where partners have a chance to show a little bit about what we're doing to extend the value of what's already built in EA are hugely valuable, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much. We're also extremely happy to bring all EA users, EA practitioners to single platform to meet each other and to share their thought process. It rarely happens. If a user group happens in particular part of the world, the people who are able to travel to that part will usually happen to meet. But this platform, it's really glad that we are still meeting and greeting each other and sharing our knowledge. So it's really good. We also feel delighted for the same. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for the wonderful session again. So yeah, thank you all participants for making this presentation, taking part in this conversation.
Thank
So
you very
please
much.
join. Yeah.
I would just say this should be at least an annual event, maybe twice a year, maybe quarterly. So I know it's a lot of work to put it on, but I hope you do more of these.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's just 3.5 weeks since we start this decision, Nizam and us. So when we decide, we wanted to make this happen as quick as possible, because after some time, people will get back to work after in few weeks time. So we just wanted to have this happen as quick as possible when people are working from home, so that they can contribute some more time towards this knowledge process. So our entire team were supporting us shoulder to shoulder. So they were working round the clock and made this happen. Thank you so much.
You have done a fabulous job from my perspective as a presenter. You have done a fabulous job. So
Yeah.
thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. Thank you all for taking part. Please continue the conversation in Teams. The video of this session will be made available online for everyone to make use of it, and you will be notified over the email. So thank you all. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the participation.
Bye-bye.
Bye.